It began, like many historic firsts, with a silence that was finally broken. For decades, Earth had watched the stars and listened. Not just with dishes in the desert or antennas buried in the Arctic, but with hope, paranoia, and the quiet hum of radio telescopes tuned to impossibility. When contact finally came, it wasn't through a grand fleet hovering over capital cities, or encrypted transmissions laced with cosmic riddles. It came in the form of a crate, a sleek, obsidian containers, smooth as polished stone, humming faintly. With an unfamiliar energy signature, materialized in low Earth orbit, no vessel accompanied it. No broadcast. Just coordinates embedded into its hull, transmitted in every major human language, along with a single word: cheers. Within hours, military satellites locked on, scientists argued. Governments panicked. But curiosity, as it always did, outweighed caution. By the time the crate was retrieved and transported to the Geneva International Research Complex, live streams of its unveiling had already gone viral. The world watched with the fevered excitement of a season finale. Inside, they found glass bottles. Dozens of them. Unused, with alien script and sealed with what appeared to be a cork made of compressed crystal. Liquid sloshed behind the glass in shades of deep burgundy and electric blue, emitting a soft, rhythmic glow as if pulsing to an invisible heartbeat. The alien delegation arrived 2 days later. They called themselves the Valeria Tall. Marble-skinned. Species draped in flowing robes that shimmered like oil on water. They spoke not through sound, but through thought. Their voices resonated inside the skull like a memory it hadn't had yet. Polite, measured, diplomatic. "We bring our finest ceremonial vintage," the lead Valeria announced in pristine English, standing beneath the polished dome of the United Nations Assembly Hall, an offering of goodwill, a shared celebration. "Let us drink to the peace between our peoples," was the kind of scene that should have been written into textbooks before it ever happened. Every country had sent someone, not just political leaders, but cultural icons, scientists, theologians, and a few who had no idea why they'd been invited at all. The event was streamed in 200 languages, captioned, transcribed, and clipped to oblivion. #Wine from the Stars trended for 3 straight days, and then the bottles were opened, not by machines, not by chemical labs, but by human hands carefully. Ceremoniously, with the reverence one might give to ancient wine or unexploded ordnance. Crystal goblets were filled. The alien liquid shimmered in the light, effervescent and mysterious. A hush fell over the chamber as glasses were raised. The toast was simple, spoken by a retired astronaut named David, chosen for his calm voice, his unshakable demeanor, and the fact that he had once survived a spacewalk while his oxygen sensor failed. He lifted his glass and said, "To the beginning of something greater than ourselves." They drank, and the galaxy waited, for precisely 8.4 seconds. Nothing happened. The human delegates stood still, their glasses now empty, their expressions blank. The Valeri delegation watched intently, their golden eyes unblinking, their posture as rigid and ceremonial as statues. To them, the countdown had begun. This was not just a toast, it was a test. The Valeri were known in certain corners of the Orion cluster as cultivators of cerulean bloomer, complex compound harvested from the crystal-veined roots of their homeworld. Distilled into liquid form and aged in zero gravity, it produced what they considered a sacred vintage. But to most non-Valeri species, it was something else entirely. Toxic, nerve-splitting, lethal in concentrated doses in ancient Valeri history. It was used not for celebration, but as a weapon administered in peace offerings to rival empires that underestimated the Valeris' quiet, aesthetic nature. Those who drank it would suffer tremors, hallucinations, and in some cases, cellular breakdown. The poison wasn't designed to kill immediately. That was the artistry. It crept in subtle, graceful, almost beautiful in its execution. And yet, woman near the front smacked her lips. A few rows back. A man tilted his glass, peered inside, and then said to the person next to him, "Tastes like licorice and burnt raisins." Another delegate, the Nigerian cultural minister, nodded, raised his eyebrows, and calmly said, "I've had worse at my uncle's wedding." Murmurs rose throughout the chamber, not cries of pain, not gasps or gurgles or the thud of collapsing. Bodies, laughter, mild confusion, and then requests for seconds. A bartender stationed nearby were brought to pour wine for post-event. Mingling looked around uncertainly before uncorking another alien bottle and refilling glasses. The camera feed caught him blinking twice before giving a quiet shrug and muttering, right then, under his breath, to the Valeri, was a surreal horror unfolding in real time. They had calculated everything: dosage, metabolic thresholds, environmental factors, even accounted for genetic variances across Earth's regions. Their data had shown a 97.2% probability of incapacitation within 10 minutes. The wine wasn't just laced, it was tailored. This wasn't arrogance, this was science. But science had overlooked one thing: humanity's relationship with alcohol. Because, while most civilizations treated intoxicants as controlled luxuries or biochemical indulgences, humans played games with them. They turned drinking into rituals, contests, dares, coming-of-age traditions. They brewed from things they weren't even supposed to eat. They drank in desserts, on frozen mountaintops, on ships that shook in storms. A woman from Canada had once distilled liquor using maple bark, bathtub yeast, and a pressure cooker. A man from Russia had reportedly fermented shoe polish during a blackout winter. College students across the world consumed neon-colored liquids, with names like Dragon's Blood, Brain Eraser, and Death by Blue Raspberry. The Valerie wine? It wasn't even in the top 10 of questionable drinks on screen. The UN translator and AI tasked with updating live captions briefly malfunctioned when it tried to render the phrase, "Kinda tastes like that punch at Dave's wedding," into 23 languages. The Valerie ambassador, standing at the front of the chamber, leaned toward one of his advisors, projecting a sharp thought stream through their private link. Why are they not reacting? The advisor blinked, flicked through a datapad, and hesitated. They are reacting. Just not how we expected. Down on the floor, a group of journalists had started rating the wine on a live stream, debating whether it had notes of elderberry or brake fluid. Someone made a meme in real time overlaying a zoomed-in image of a delegate sipping with the caption, "Aliens tried to take us out. We took them out for drinks." Within minutes, the meme was on every social feed. Within an hour, it was being printed on t-shirts in 5 different countries. What had begun as a covert act of interstellar sabotage was now trending under the hashtag Galactic Happy Hour. The Valeri had come bearing poison disguised as peace, and Earth's response? Got anything stronger? By the 20-minute mark, the event had officially gone off script. The carefully structured timeline, prepared weeks in advance by United Nations protocol officers, is now buried under a tidal wave of spontaneous human enthusiasm. Speeches were abandoned. Cultural exchange ceremonies were forgotten. The orchestra, scheduled to perform a symphonic collaboration with Valeri resonance chimes, never made it past the tuning phase. Instead, laughter echoed through the assembly chamber. Someone had wheeled in a tray of assorted human wines Cabernet. Merlot, Syrah as if to return the gesture. Bottles clinked. Toasts flew. Delegates from opposite ends of political spectrums traded sips of the Valeri wine like connoisseurs, comparing notes. One delegate from South America claimed it tasted exactly like a failed bottle of passion fruit wine he'd once bought on impulse from a roadside shack. He meant it as a compliment. Somewhere near the front, a former astronaut handed a glass to a camera operator and said, "This stuff would have made the moon landing a lot more fun." The Valeri, still perched on their elevated dais with expressions that now hovered somewhere between horror and scholarly confusion, watched the chaos unfold like scientists observing an experiment gone wildly off the dash rails. Ambassador Elrix, the one who had delivered the ceremonial wine with all the pomp of a galactic envoy, stood still as stone. But internally, his thought stream was ablaze. This was supposed to be efficient, calculated. I don't understand. He had been promised results. Not long ago, Their bioalchemists had reported with pride that the adjusted strain of cerulean Bloom tincture 7A would destabilize human neural pathways within moments. Their metabolic data on Earth's dominant species, extracted from decades of intercepted transmissions, blood sample trades, and black market specimens, had pointed to a species with surprisingly fragile internal chemistry, yet here they were, giggling, dancing, and worse, comparing flavor profiles. "Try it with cheese," someone called. "It actually pairs pretty well." The Valaris lead scientist aboard their orbiting vessel, the Scholar's Edge, had been monitoring vitals from orbit. When Ambassador Elrix requested a status update, the reply was not what he expected. No system failures. Elevated heart rates, but within standard parameters for excitement or intoxication. Some laughter-induced oxygen spikes. One subject appears to be singing in what we think is Old Irish. Conclusion, Elrix asked tightly. They are fine. Somehow possibly enjoying it. Elrix stared at the feed coming from the chamber floor. Two French chefs had joined forces with a Korean diplomat to create what they called a cosmic fusion charcuterie plate. A Somali delegate dipped Valeri wine into what suspiciously resembled goat cheese and hummed approvingly. At the back of the room, an American YouTuber live-streamed himself chugging a full glass while shouting, "First contact, baby!" into the camera. For the Valeri, this was not only a diplomatic disaster, it was a cultural paradox where other species reacted. To cerulean bloom with paralysis, vomiting, or quiet existential dread, the humans responded with unfiltered absurdity. One simply couldn't prepare for a species that, when faced with what was effectively a biochemical weapon, grabbed a second bottle and started an impromptu dance circle. And then came the final humiliation. A delegate from rural Poland stood, wobbled slightly, raised a glass, and said in thickly accented English, "This not poison. This is Tuesday." The quote was clipped, shared, captioned, and translated within minutes. It became the banner image of news feeds across Earth and a dozen stations in the Mars orbital colonies. The image of his crooked smile, arm extended with the glowing alien drink, became an instant meme symbol of humanity's unshakable, ridiculous resilience. By the end of the day, it's Tuesday, mugs were in production. Meanwhile, in orbit, confusion rippled through Valeri ranks. Some called for immediate disengagement and departure. Others urged retesting. A few even suggested that humans had deliberately mutated their physiology to withstand attacks like this. But among the younger scientists, those raised in the age of rapid cultural interconnectivity, a quiet realization began to take hold. They weren't immune to the wine. They just didn't care. Humans didn't recoil from discomfort. They romanticized it, celebrated it, turned it into stories, challenges, and drinking games. If an experience made their eyes water, their stomach churn, or their head spin, they didn't reject it. They shared it. Cerulean bloom wasn't a weapon to humanity. It was a party starter. The galaxy wasn't ready, and neither were the Vala, the Scholar's Edge, Valeri science vessel in low orbit over Earth, was not equipped to handle existential dread. It had been designed for logic, analysis, and pristine isolation, a floating cathedral of intellect, free from the chaos and unpredictability of planetary life. But today, its laboratories pulsed with a different energy. Monitors blinked red not with danger, but with disbelief. Dozens of analysts hunched over biometric streams, trying to reconcile what their own data refused to support. Human subjects weren't just alive after consuming cerulean bloom, they were energized, active, euphoric. One subject was doing push-ups on the carpet after 3 glasses. Another was recorded arm wrestling a UN guard while whistling. Dr. Vellner, the ship's chief biocognologist, stood before a display of real-time vitals from one particularly active individual. An Australian delegate who had consumed the Valeri wine laughed, chugged another glass, and then led a conga line of diplomats through the aisles of the assembly hall. "This shouldn't be happening," Vellner muttered, eyes twitching. "This cannot be happening." His assistant hesitated before speaking. "Perhaps. Their biology is more adaptive than we assumed." No, it's not adaptation, Vellner said, shaking his head slowly. It's acclimatization. The difference, though subtle in language, was monumental in biology. Adaptation is evolution. It takes generations, millennia. Acclimatization is learned, conditioned, self-inflicted. Run a cultural compound search, Vellner snapped. Filter for any known human intoxicants with neurological volatility profiles over 30%. The results were disturbing. Charts appeared on screen, spreadsheet of substances humans had willingly ingested across history. Alcohols with absurd ethanol levels, substances distilled from plants that other species considered fatal, as fungi that glowed. In the dark, fermented liquids made from rice, potatoes, cacti, honey, herbs, engine grease, and something called habanero vodka. Some cultures had even brewed liquor in prisons using fruit, sugar, and body heat. On other worlds, people drank to calm themselves, to relax. Humans. Sometimes they drank to see gods. The report included a quote from a cultural journal. Tastes like fire and regret. But the third shot goes down easy. Vellner's trembling fingers tapped through ancient earth imagery. Images of humans in snow-covered huts passing wooden flasks. College students yelling over red solo cups. Soldiers in trenches clinking metal canteens during brief moments of peace. A single theme emerged from centuries of records. Resilience through ritual, endurance through excess. Cerulean Bloom had not encountered a naive, soft-palated civilization. It had encountered a species forged in the fires of bad decisions and fermented rebellion. A species that had trained its nervous system to tolerate chaos, sometimes for celebration, sometimes for escape, and sometimes just to feel something strange. The more the Valeri observed, the more Earth seemed less like a backwater world, and more like a testing ground for pain tolerance wrapped in laughter and stubborn optimism. The Scholar's Edge team pulled up a sample of human video media tagged reaction challenge. In one, a teenager drinks an entire bottle of hot sauce and screams. In another, 3 men consume vodka while being tased by low-voltage shock collars. A woman drinks from a jar labeled pickle moonshine and calmly says, "Not bad, but the aftertaste fights back." By Valeri standards, these were acts of madness. By human standards, they were entertainment. Dr. Vellner leaned back from the console and let out a low hum sound of awe, disbelief, and just a touch of fear. They're not immune to our compound. He whispered, "They're numb to it. They've trained for this their entire history." And that history wasn't just biological, it was cultural, psychological, philosophical. Humans had long glorified their ability to endure. Not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, chemically. Where other species shielded themselves from discomfort, humans embraced it, wrestled with it, turned it into poetry and drinking songs. It was there in their language's phrases. Like burns going down, hair of the dog, and I'll regret this tomorrow. In another society, those might be warnings. In human society, they were invitations. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the celebration was still underway. Someone had pulled out an acoustic guitar. Someone else had suggested turning the lights down for ambiance. Bottles of cerulean bloom were being passed around like party favors. And somewhere in the crowd, a group had started referring to it as alien sangria. And floating high above them, in the silent halls of the Scholar's Edge, a question rippled quietly through the minds of its crew. If this didn't work, what else won't? For the first time in centuries, the Valeri weren't just confused by another species, they were intimidated. By morning, the official news outlets were scrambling to keep up. What began as a historic first contact event had spiraled into a planetary-wide celebration. Headlines shifted by the hour, mutating in real time as new clips, memes, and reactions poured in. Alien wine sparks global unity? Undelegates get tipsy with extraterrestrials. Humanity gets drunk on first contact, literally. Public reaction was overwhelmingly positive, perhaps too positive. Social media was ablaze with homemade cocktails labeled Valeri Breeze, Meteor Mouth, and the slightly concerning Bloom Bomb. Craft distilleries in Europe had already announced collaborative experimental brews using chemical analyses of the Valeri wine. But beneath the surface of humanity's viral euphoria, the tension crackled inside the United Nations private conference wing. 2 floors above the party, and far from any cameras, a high-stakes emergency meeting was already in progress. Security staff in crisp black uniforms stood outside the doors, their earpieces buzzing non-stop as reports streamed in from every continent. At the head of the curved table, the Secretary General looked like she'd aged 5 years in 5 hours. "So let me get this straight," she said, voice low but steeled. "The Valeri brought us wine that wasn't a gift. It was a soft kill toxin." The room answered in silence. Then one intelligence officer, seated stiffly behind a datapad, cleared his throat. "Correct, ma'am. According to toxicologists, the compound inside the wine matches neuroinhibitors found in a classified Valeri bioweapons report leaked by the Gortian Trade Coalition. 5 years ago, this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate attempt to incapacitate Earth's leadership." The Secretary General pressed her fingers together, and it didn't work. "No, ma'am," said another advisor. "Our people appear to have metabolized it, or rather enjoyed it." She paused, exhaled slowly, and glanced up at the screen showing a live news feed. A Brazilian soccer player was giving an impromptu interview at a fan event, holding up a bottle of cerulean bloom with a grin. "Tastes like pain and victory. I like it." There was no guidebook for this. The Valeri, meanwhile, had retreated. Not physically, but diplomatically. Their ships remained in orbit. Their emissaries had not withdrawn. But communication had. Slowed to a crawl, and their delegation inside the UN compound was no longer engaging with human officials. Their translator nodes had gone dark, and the ones polished. Poised diplomats were now behaving more like confused students caught cheating. During a final exam, an emergency transmission had been sent from Earth's Defense Coalition to the Valeri orbiting fleet. It was phrased carefully, equal parts firm and open-ended. "We are aware of the nature of the compound in the wine. Humanity does not appreciate subterfuge under the guise of diplomacy. However, we acknowledge the Valeri delegation's presence. As peaceful, clarification is requested before further steps are taken." No reply, no threats, just silence. And silence from a species known for vocal diplomacy was louder than any declaration. Meanwhile, human analysts were already dissecting the implications of what had just happened in a secured briefing room within the Geneva Intelligence Complex. Behavioral scientists, military strategists, and cultural experts gathered around a central holotable. On the screen was a real-time web showing galactic trade routes, first contact maps, and species known for bioalchemical technologies. A voice from the shadows belonging to a Black Ops liaison simply, labeled Director Marshall, broke the tension. They weren't just testing us. They were profiling us, seeing what kind of enemy or ally we might be. A general frowned, and they learned. "What? That we don't break the way others do?" The director tapped the console. Dozens of red tags bloomed across the galactic map, each representing cultures that had historically succumbed to Valeri soft toxin diplomacy. Economies destabilized, governments toppled, treaties forced under the guise of kindness, all with a sip of peaceful wine. But Earth hadn't fallen. It had partied through the poison, and that made humans. It's unpredictable, dangerous, not because of aggression, but because of resilience, wrapped in absurdity. You could study a species that reacted logically to threats, but how do you conquer a species that jokes through attempted assassination and turns biochemical warfare into a tasting session? In the Valeri ambassadorial quarters, chaos brewed behind closed doors. Ambassador Elric stood before a mirror-like wall, no longer adorned in ceremonial robes, but wrapped in the emergency regalia of a crisis statesman. His aides moved around him silently, eyes downcast. He activated the diplomatic journal, recording a private log, mission log. Valerie. Earth initiation, entry 219. Status, failed. Tactic, failed. Projection model, inaccurate. Human resilience exceeds known thresholds. Emotional and chemical durability unclassified. Recommended course of action, strategic pause. Risk of miscalculation, high. Potential for humiliation, already. Achieved. He stopped, stared at his own reflection. They drank it, he whispered. They drank the poison and asked for the recipe. He ended the recording, and in that moment the Valeri fully understood. They had not underestimated human intelligence, nor their technology, nor even their defenses. They had underestimated their insanity, their defiant laughter in the face of pain, their cultural conviction that if something tried to hurt them, they'd swallow it whole and burp up a joke. Diplomacy hadn't failed. The Valeri had. Asterisk. Long before the Valeri could clean up their diplomatic mess or rewrite the narrative, the story was already racing through galactic subnets. Private comes and informal trade broadcasts like wildfire across dry leaves. It leaped past language barriers, crashed through encrypted channels, and burst into the consciousness of systems that hadn't even known what a human was 3 cycles ago. One headline, translated across dozens of species, became the first. Spark. Humans drink biochemical toxin. Ask for refill. It was meant to be satire. But no one laughed, because it wasn't wrong in the midrim. The Athari Council ordered a temporary halt to all human-related trade discussions. In the tech consortium, war simulations were revised overnight now, including human resistance to chemical agents. 8. The shadow markets of Tau Dagger, mercenary guilds, posted notices that read, "No human bounties. Too weird. Not worth the trouble." The incident began acquiring names. Historians in real time argued over what to call it. The wine war, the toasting incident, first contact hangover, or the oddly poetic cerulean collapse. But to most corners of the galaxy, it was simply remembered as the day humans didn't die. On worlds far removed from Earth's blue skies, aliens gathered in hushed rooms, playing footage from the UN assembly, analyzing frame by frame the behavior of these peculiar Terrans. There, in the middle of the chaos, were people laughing. Not maniacally, not nervously, but with genuine amusement. Some were raising toasts. One delegate was doing a slow, solo dance to music that didn't exist. Another group was mixing Valeri wine with soda for flavor balance. 2 species who measured success by restraint. In grace, the humans looked like lunatics. 2 species who valued power and endurance. They looked like champions. Either way, they weren't weak. In a broadcast intercepted near the red halos of Kiver Prime, a Zarn tactician put it bluntly during a military symposium: if you engage the humans, do so with caution. Their bodies defy standard predictions. Their minds tolerate madness. Their culture feeds on adversity like a nutrient. And they apparently consider attempted poisoning an invitation to party. The diplomatic effect was immediate. Tanned deep. Valeri. Emissaries on other planets were met with cold stares and reluctant handshakes. Former allies questioned whether the ceremonial wine they'd once accepted was ever truly benign. Rumors stirred of failed gifts, once explained away as rare allergies or sudden illness, now reinterpreted through the Earth incident. The Valeri, known for centuries as soft-spoken arbiters of culture, now stood on the edge of scandal. Not for being aggressive, but for being defeated by hospitality and the humans. They weren't even doing damage control. They were selling merch. On Earth, a viral campaign had already exploded across digital platforms, stronger than cerulean. T-shirts, mugs, bottle labels. A startup in Oregon began producing Alien Red, cherry-colored cocktail named after the Valeri brew. It came with a warning label that read, "May cause existential reflection," or just a buzz. A Scottish pub offered a challenge: down 3 shots of bloom juice and earn a pin that read, "Survive the Valeri handshake, even Earth's." Military intelligence, usually the last 2 jokes, had quietly issued new doctrine. Labels in its cultural analysis files: species classification, HFY, resilient, reckless, celebratory under threat. HFY, humanity, F asterisk. Yeah, asterisk asterisk, once a fringe subculture on digital forums. Now an unofficial diplomatic warning. Meanwhile, somewhere deep in the outer reaches, on a mining colony governed by the insectoid Dresk, a young worker watched a replay of the human event. He turned to his crewmate and said something simple: "We shouldn't mess with them." The other nodded. "They'd scare me, but I also kind of want to drink with one." That sentiment echoed more than the fear. Because behind the laughter, behind the dancing and absurd reactions to biochemical toxins, there was something magnetic about humanity. They were dangerous but not cruel. Storing. They didn't posture because they didn't need to. They simply were. They had absorbed a Valeri toxin engineered over centuries, something that once unraveled empires and turned it into a weekend anecdote, and they didn't even seem to realize they'd done something remarkable back on Earth. And memes soared and world governments drafted polite, non-retaliatory statements. One quiet fact became undeniable. Humanity's reputation had changed. They were no longer the quaint blue planet at the edge of the civilized galactic map. They were a species that others now whispered about. Carefully. Because you can fight an enemy. You can outthink a strategist. But how do you compete with a species that welcomes poison like an old friend, shrugs it off, and then asks for the recipe? Asterisk, a week had passed. In interstellar diplomacy, a week was usually a heartbeat. On Earth, it was an eternity. The Grand Hall of the United Nations, once pristine, polished, and steeped in the gravitas of its first contact event, now bore subtle signs of the celebration it had hosted: scuffed tiles, displaced chairs, lingering scent of strange fruit and carbonated alien wine. And somewhere near the podium, still etched into the wood with what might have been a butter knife, were the words, "Nice try." The Valeri had withdrawn their delegation 2 days earlier, not in fury, not in disgrace, just quietly. They left with the same elegance they had arrived, with silent hovercrafts, folded robes, unreadable expressions. No formal apologies were issued, no messages followed. Only a digital note left behind in their embassy databank: "We regret our miscalculation. Your species is unexpected." It was not quite surrender, not quite fear. It was an admission of something more powerful than either: respect back on Earth. Humanity had not slowed down. Bars across major cities had renamed their alien Red House cocktails to cerulean surprise. Tourism boards leaned into the branding: "Come, drink like a human." Cultural events sprang up: overnight half-celebration, half-science fair dedicated to galactic fusion cuisine and interstellar beverage adaptability. One viral show saw hosts from different countries sampling alien-inspired drinks and rating them by regret index. The winner was still the Valeri wine. I'll run up. A Filipino rice whiskey fermented in bamboo. When asked how he felt about being poisoned during a diplomatic event, one delegate from Kenya simply said, "Honestly, I've had worse from my uncle still in the Rift Valley. That one nearly made me speak in tongues." The story had evolved from scandal to celebration to myth, a testament to the resilience not of Earth's weapons, nor its economy, nor its science, but of its sheer, unreasonable ability to endure, to find humor in hostility, to make a party out of peril, to drink a bioweapon and call it. It's interesting. But while the world danced, toasted, rebranded the incident into a festival, one quieter shift was taking place beneath the fanfare, in the secure underground chamber of Earth's global defense coordination nexus. Senior officials met again, this time not in crisis, but in curiosity. The tone was different. The humans seated around the table were no longer reacting to an attack. They were thinking ahead. A general tapped the screen, pulling up galactic incident logs. If the Valeri did this, others might try something smarter, quieter, less drinkable.
Another
Chimed in. So what's our takeaway here?
what's
Our defense. The room paused. Then a middle-aged woman in civilian attire, an anthropologist who had advised intelligence agencies for years, leaned forward with a faint smile. "Our defense," she said softly, "is that we didn't treat the event as an attack at all. We didn't flinch. That's what shocked them. That's what scared them. The others looked at her. The Valeria expected pain to be our limit. But to humans, pain is a language, a joke, a bonding ritual. We mock it. We toast to it. We bottle it and sell it with fruit juice. She closed her tablet and sat back. Our greatest weapon isn't our firepower. It's our refusal to see ourselves as weak, even when we are. On a quiet suburban rooftop in New Zealand, far from embassies and military briefings, 3 old friends sat under the stars. They weren't diplomats. They weren't soldiers. It's just 3 people in folding chairs, sipping drinks from mismatched glasses, watching the sky. One of them poured from a tall bottle labeled Alien Red. It shimmered faintly in the moonlight, an echo of that strange Valeri glow. "Do you think they'll come back?" one asked, lazily swirling the drink. The second shrugged. "Maybe, but I doubt they'll bring wine this time." The third laughed. "If they do, they better bring chasers." They raised their glasses in an unspoken toast, then clinked them together with a quiet "to Earth." Poor, crazy, beautiful Earth. A satellite passed overhead, silent, gleaming, watched unknowingly by countless other eyes across the galaxy. Somewhere out there, species were recalculating their risk profiles, rewriting their cultural profiles of humanity, reconsidering plans, because this was no longer the species they thought they understood. Earth was no longer a backwater planet filled with squabbling apes. It was the species that drank the poison and asked for more. It was the one that laughed in the face of subtle warfare, the one that toasted survival before knowing it had been under attack. And for all its flaws, its chaos, its contradictions, ... it had earned its place, not through conquest, not through diplomacy, but through one perfect, ridiculous, unforgettable moment, a toast, a sip, and a planet full of people who simply refused to fall.